So now that we understand evolution and what an adaptation is, we can now apply that concept to how certain behaviors and certain uh, maybe personality or things like that could have been passed down through generations in humans. So, social adaptations in humans. Here we're looking at the innate ability to acquire language, responsiveness to human faces, some sort of group seeking behavior, things like that. So, these are all behaviors, specifically social behaviors, that we don't really understand. These aren't things we have to be taught, these are things we're born with. You're born with the ability to learn a language. You're born being able to recognize a human face. You're born kind of seeking out a group. Humans need some sort of social interaction. Also, some universal emotions. So, emotions like happy, sad, mad, those are very universal. Across the globe, everyone understands what a smile is. Okay, you smile at someone, they know what that means. They know oh, that person's happy. Okay, we could show these pictures to anyone across the world, and I could say, what do you think they're feeling? They would all say happy. Okay, that's universal. You don't need to learn that. You can ask very young children, and they know what that is. Um, so humans, we have this need to belong, and so there may have been some sort of adaptive process to protect us against something, and being in a group maybe helped that. Okay, so those that lived in a group setting were more likely to survive than individuals living on their own, perhaps. um, Even if it's a small group, groups of 2 to 3, is still more beneficial in general than a group of just one. Um, so that may be what led us to some of these things. The ability to acquire language, this may have happened so that when small groups met each other, they were able to communicate. Okay, and there was some sort of beneficial thing to the ability to communicate between groups or between individuals. The ability to recognize human faces and universal emotions, these would be beneficial, so that you avoid, conflict, so that, also important in attracting a mate, especially if, before we had language. It's very important. And we actually see that there's some universal emotions across species. So there's certain sounds that not only humans but other animals can recognize as being a good sound versus a bad sound. So like an animal in pain, or uh, some sort of alarm call. Okay, these are universal things that not just humans but other animals can relate to. Okay, then we've got parental investment. So this is one of these social adaptations that again we see in humans a large part, but we can also study this in different animals, to see what is the benefit of different types of parental investment, for their environment, for their social communities. So, social investment is talking about the amount of time, the amount of effort, energy, and risk that is associated with successfully caring for each offspring. So, as humans, we invest a lot of time into a very small number of offspring. But if you look at, say, sea turtles or even mice, they produce a lot of offspring with very little time and effort investment. Okay, they have their kids and then they're like, "Okay, bye." Whereas with humans, we keep our children close to us for 18 years, sometimes more, sometimes a little less, taking care of them and raising them and putting in a lot of time, effort, and energy. And this is, can be associated with risk. For humans, there's not much risk involved in spending this much time with our children. But for other animals, then the more time they spend with their offspring trying to raise them, the more likely not only the offspring, but the adult themselves is likely to be eaten, pretty much. Okay? So it doesn't make sense for them to spend so much time on an offspring. So what we tend to see is that the more parental investment there is, the smaller the number of offspring, and the less care and investment that a parent can give, the more offspring they'll have, just so that it's more likely that one offspring will be successful. Okay, because again, the purpose of life is to procreate, and so it's not only that you want to procreate yourself, but you want your offspring to have offspring to have offspring, etc., to spread your genetic information. Okay, so two parents may not invest equally in their offspring. So again, think about, say, that stereotypical, especially like earlier idea in humans that women stay home with the children and the men go off to work, right? So the two parents are not investing equally in that offspring. It's mostly the women that were taking care of the offspring. The men were providing financially, but they weren't doing a lot of the emotional support, the physical support, all of that. So it's not equal. And these sex differences in investment can explain these mating systems. So that's why in humans and even in birds, so a lot of birds, then the female bird will sit with the egg and help raise the chick when it hatches, whereas the male doesn't spend as much time with the chick. And this, we can see then why the females then are more picky about who they choose to be their mate. Because if they're going to put so much energy and effort into this one chick, boy, that better be really good genes that they're getting, right? You don't want like second-rate genes. You want prime real estate. So they're going to be more picky. And this is what could have led to the males having to get these fancy plumages and do these fancy dances in order to attract the best mate, to show off, hey, I'm a very good choice. I have the best genes. You want my genes to raise your child. Okay? And so it tends to be that the sex that puts in more parental investment can be more choosy about who they are picking. So it's the sex that puts in less investment that really needs to do the impressing. Okay? They have to put on the little show. In general, that's what we see in animals, at least. Now, there's different mating systems that can occur. There will be more competition for the sex that makes the highest parental investment. So again, usually females. Males are competing for the best females. Okay? But then the female usually gets to choose. Okay? So they get to be nice and picky. Now, we're going to go over a few different types of mating systems. This one is the most well-known, I'm sure. It's what humans tend to do. It's called monogamous. You've probably heard of it. This is where two parents have an equal parental investment, okay? So one male, one female usually, and they are bonded together. They don't go off anywhere, okay? The male doesn't go off and have multiple females. The female doesn't go off and have multiple males. It's one male, one female. Okay? Now, because of this, then the males actually tend to stick around and help raise their young. Now, they might not put in as much investment as the female, but they will help out. Okay? And because of this, then we actually tend to see very little sexual dimorphism between the sexes. In other words, in these species, like you see here, it's hard to tell the difference between a male and female bird because they look so alike. And that's because the males don't need to put on a show. They don't need fancy feathers and plumages and everything to go out and get a female, because they're also going to put in the work. Now, there might be a little bit of differences. Like, I would say that this is the male and this is the female, guessing. There's a little bit of a difference, but not too much. Okay. Now, usually this arises because any one parent would not be able to successfully bring up that young. So this is especially big in birds, because usually one parent will stay in the nest, kind of guarding and warming the eggs, watching over the young chicks, while the other mate will go out and get food, and then they'll switch off. Okay? Think about in Happy Feet. Great movie. Now, there are other mating systems, of course. So, we've got, I'm horrible with pronunciation. You guys are going to have a great time listening to this. Polygamous. How can I know that word? And yet, so this is unequal contributions, okay? So one is going to have more contribution than the other. All of these three underneath are types of polygamy, okay? So we've got polyandry. Polyandry is where there's one female but multiple males. This means we're going to have the males are going to have male competition is going to drive the evolution. Okay? So there's less females than there are males. Okay? So the males want to get the good females. So they're going to compete. Polygyny is where there's one male and many females. Okay, so that means that the female competition is going to drive evolution. So this is where you might then see females being more fancy than the males. And then finally, we've got polygynandry, which is many males and many females. Okay, so there's no monogamy, there's no bonding. Okay, it's a free-for-all. Lots of males, lots of females, and what you're actually going to see is that it might actually look more like a monogamous couple, because you're not going to have one sex competing more than the other sex. Both sexes are going to compete equally. Okay, so you're not going to see more plumage on one sex than the other. So, what about mate preference? Okay, what do men look for? What do women look for? Okay, now these are in humans. This was a study done in North America. Obviously, this is what the majority said. Obviously, not everyone looks for this and all that, but if you guys are single and looking for a mate, I can help you out. So, both men and women want to be attracted to each other. That's important. They would both men and women want someone that's dependable. Okay? Both men and women want an emotionally stable partner. Okay? Now, these mate preferences, I'm not sure, but I would assume that this is very similar and shouldn't matter whether you're looking for a mate of the same sex, different sex, or non-binary. But when questioned, what do you look for in a mate? This is what both men and women said. Men also said that they look for physical attractiveness and health. They want good health in their partner. Okay? Women said that they look for earning potential, status, and ambition. Now, it is important to note that this is an older study, okay? This was, I believe, in the 90s, so still when women weren't as strong in the work field. So maybe this would change if we did this now. But at the time, this is what women were looking for, okay? Now, personally, do I look for ambition? I do. But, I also don't mind, this stuff. Obviously no one minds physical attractiveness, but it doesn't rate as highly for women as it does for men in general. Um, in general, then what women prefer is women tend to prefer older mates. So this would be an average of 3.5 years older is in general what women were attracted to. They were attracted to symmetrical faces and high parental investment. They wanted someone to help them raise offspring. Okay, they didn't want to do it all themselves. Okay, men were looking for a partner that was young and healthy, and also a symmetrical face. Now, it's interesting that both put symmetrical face here, but in the last one, only men put physical attractiveness, which a symmetrical face tends to be associated with physical attractiveness. Okay. Now, this sample that was taken, it was an ethically, religiously, and socioeconomically diverse group that it was taken from. But I don't know exactly how equally it was representative of different sexualities. But still, very interesting to note that males and females do look at slightly different things. But they also kind of match up. So if women want older and men want younger, it matches up pretty well. Both want a symmetrical face. Great. Women tend to want higher parental investment. Men don't really talk about it. But very interesting. And that also makes sense why there's then successful couples, because we are looking for similar things, or what we're looking for matches up nicely. Okay. Now, let's talk about altruism and cooperation, because these are some important terms that can actually come together when we're talking about parental investment and mating strategies. Okay, so cooperation is where a single individual helps another individual, and will gain some advantage. Okay, so I'm going to help you so that I achieve a goal. Okay, whereas altruism is where I'm going to help you at no cost to me. Okay, so I'm not getting anything out of helping you. I'm just doing it out of the goodness of my heart. That is altruism. Okay, you see someone fall onto the tracks at the LRT, you jump down and help them get out. Okay, that's altruism. You're not getting anything out of that. Cooperation is someone falls in and you're like, I'll get you out if you give me $1. And then you let them out and you get $1. Okay, that's cooperation. You're getting something out of it. Okay. So think about that. Sometimes, if you think about parental styles, that tends to be more cooperation. Okay, the males and females are cooperating together because they're getting something out of it. If I help you raise this child, my genes are more likely to survive and be passed on. Whereas if I don't help you, the offspring might die. So it's to my benefit to help you raise this child. That's cooperation. Okay? Altruism would be like, say, a step parent. Like, I'm going to step in and help you raise this child. I get no genetic benefit out of it, okay? But I'm still going to help out. Now, obviously, there's love and care and other things going on. But you can also think about altruism. Oh, I love it. There's this story where there was a duck and 2 geese, I believe it was, or was it a goose and 2 swans? There were 3 birds, and one of them was a different species. And he helped raise the offspring of this couple of, let's say, swans, 2 swans and a goose. This one goose went and helped, pretty much became a third in the relationship with these 2 swans, and he helped raise the swans' babies. Okay? He got nothing out of it. He got no biological genetic output from that, so that was altruism. Okay? Whereas the two swans were doing more cooperation because they were passing on their genes. Okay? But it was such a cute story. The goose recently died. Moving on. So there are some theories behind altruism, why we might do it. The first theory is kin selection theory. So this arose to increase the likelihood of relatives surviving. So I might not have direct genetic relationship to you, but if I help you out, I'll be more likely, or my kin's genes are more likely to pass on. Because even though they're not my genes, they're still related to me. It might be only 25% of my genes, but it's still part of me, right? So I'd be more likely, in this instance, I would be more likely to help out my cousin than a complete stranger, okay? Because my cousin has some genes related to me, or more genes related to me than this stranger would, okay? That would be kin selection theory. Reciprocal altruism theory is that it contributes to long-term cooperation. So it's kind of like the idea of karma, I like to think of it, where, well, I'll help you now, and then something good will come to me later, okay? So maybe, I help you now, I'm going to pull you off the train tracks, and then later you're going to see me, say, without a bus pass in 2 weeks, and you'll be like, oh, hey, here, have mine. So I don't get anything out of it now, but you're more likely to help me out later. Okay, so that's reciprocal altruism. It's the idea that I'll help you now so that you will help me when I need it later on. Okay. Or karma, if I do something good now, something good will come to me later. So, kin selection theory. If this theory is true, then we should see that there's a positive relationship between acts of altruism and the degree of relatedness. Okay? So that means we should do more altruistic acts towards our relatives. Also, that would suggest I would do more acts of altruism to my parents than I would to my grandparents, than I would to my cousins. Okay? And so people actually did a study of this. So in a study of 300 adult women, then they looked at it, and this is what they found. On the x-axis, we have genetic relatedness. So here we got 0.5, so that would be a parent or a sibling. Here we've got 0.25, so that would be a grandparent or a aunt or uncle. And here we have less than 0.25, so like a cousin or anything more beyond that. And then on the y-axis, we have percent of helping. So the number, how many times did they help them? And what we see is the more related they were, the more acts of helping that occurred. Okay, so this supports the kin selection theory. If the reciprocal altruism theory is true, then we should see that individuals would remember who has and who has not helped them in the past. Okay? So we should help the helpers and ignore the ignorers. Okay? So if, say, I fell in the train tracks and someone helped me out, but someone else didn't, if the person that didn't help me out fell in the train tracks, I'd be like, sucks to be you, and not help them out. That's what the reciprocal altruism theory might say. Okay? Or if both of them fell in, I would help out the person that helped me in the past. I would help them first, and then I'd help the other people. Okay? So this is not related to relatedness. Aggression is another behavior that may have evolved as a trait. Okay? And there's a number of theories around why it evolved. It may have been to protect your mate or your young, to protect your territory, to protect the food within your territory. There's a number of reasons why animals and humans use aggression. Okay? We can also use aggression to not just protect our own things, but to take someone else's resources. So I could take your territory. I could take your food. Taking a mate, if there's not enough females, I could steal someone else's so that I have one if I need one. Okay? That's another reason for aggression. And then, of course, to gain new resources. So again, if there's an unclaimed territory or an unclaimed food, well, me and the other person there are now going to fight over who gets it. Okay, so we see this in a number of different animals. And again, we do see this in humans, which, yes, humans are animals. Please just know that. But we see it. Now, if you look in the notes section of the PowerPoint, which is going to be down here, I do have a YouTube video of a bear fight, in case you were wondering. Or you could just Google bear fight or zebras fighting or something like that. Okay, so in social animals, that individuals can recognize individuals and remember past encounters. In other words, we can hold grudges. Okay, I know who I fought, and I know whether I won or they won. Okay, a number of animals can do that. In almost every single social animal, they can do that. And what that does is it creates dominance hierarchies. So this is where animals will fight once, and this helps establish a rank. So you beat me, so you're going to be higher in the hierarchy than I am. But I beat Sally, so Sally's below me. So we all know the rank, okay? And now, when new resources come, because we've already done this, then you're going to get first pick. I get second pick, and Sally comes last. Okay, so we don't need to fight every single time. We only have to fight once to establish the rank. And this creates that pecking order. Now, of course, we can always, maybe after a while, I'm like, you know what? I'm sick of going second. I want to fight you again. And I could. And that could disrupt the current hierarchy and create a new one. This would be important if, say, there's a new individual, or if someone gets sick, or if you get injured or something. I could take advantage of that and boost my position. But that's a really important thing that happens with aggression, and animals use it to then really decrease further aggression, because the more times you have to fight, the more likely you are to get injured and die, which means you're not going to be able to pass on your genes. So we want aggression, that's important, but we also want to minimize aggression so that I can establish my dominance, but not at the risk of not passing on my genes. Now, there are some thought pitfalls around genetics and evolution and behavior. So one would be genetic determinants. This is the false idea that the effects of genes are concrete and unchangeable. Okay, you can change things. Okay, genes aren't end all be all. Okay, so genetic determinants, false. We have shown that. We have shown that environment also plays a role. Okay, genetics. There's no such thing as destiny, at least when it comes to genetics. Okay, if you want to believe in destiny, you go for it. But I'll make my own destiny. Because genetics can't determine my future by themselves. We've then got social Darwinism. This is the false idea that those at the top of the social hierarchy are the best. Okay? So, survival of the fittest, and the less fit needs to go. So, pretty much social Darwinism is saying the notion of genetic superiority. Okay? And that those at the top of the social hierarchy has had some sort of destructive consequences. Okay, so think of eugenics. Um, those that are less biologically fit need to go. Think of, I'm gonna say it, think of the Nazis. Okay, the Nazis had this need for the master race. They were using the idea of social Darwinism. That is false, okay? Just because you're at the top of the social hierarchy does not mean you have the best genetics, okay? Environment plays a role. Those at the top of the social hierarchy, if the environment around you were to shift for some reason, your genes may now not be the best, and evolution and natural selection can select against you. Just because you are at the top once does not mean you will always be at the top. Okay? That leads us into defending the status quo. Okay? The idea that if a trait comes from evolution, it must be good. Well, that's not true. Okay? Sometimes a trait sticks around in evolution because it's not bad, but it's not good. It's just there. Okay? Evolution doesn't have a grand plan. There's not this whole like big plan and we all know where we're all going to go and evolution's pointing us in the right direction. No. Okay, evolution just happens because of environment and again, these mutations. They just happen by accident. Okay? So some things are there, some things are not. Like, is the idea that we have 5 fingers because 5 fingers is ideal? Not necessarily. Maybe 6 fingers would be the best, but we just haven't evolved there yet. Or, some people do have a 6 finger, but not enough that that trait has been passed down. Okay? Just because a trait goes away doesn't mean it was a bad trait. It, would have been hurtful. Just because a trait doesn't come around doesn't mean that it's a bad trait. Okay, we are constantly evolving from generation to generation, and things just happen in accordance with nature. Okay, so we cannot use the excuse that destructive behaviors are because of nature. Okay, you do have some control over it. Yeah, that's what I got. So, I hope you guys understand Chapter 4. Sorry these videos were posted a bit late. Again, let me know if you have any questions, and next week we will move on to Chapter 5.